A Jesse Plemons lookalike contest broke out on Sunday at Busch Stadium, and Andrew Abbott of the Cincinnati Reds got the better of Miles Mikolas. But actually, they played a baseball game, and the same thing happened. Cardinals dropped the finale, can't sweep the Reds. We'll talk about it coming up on B-Schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome in to this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Sunday evening, June 22nd, 2025. The Cardinals fall short on Sunday against the Cincinnati Reds. Can't sweep the series. They drop it 4-1 in the finale after winning on Friday night behind a well-pitched game from Andre Granillo after winning in come-from-behind fashion on Saturday in 11 innings. Joel Pozo, the hero in that one. But Sunday, the Cardinals just could not get the bats going, as Andrew Abbott of the Reds was brilliant. 7 innings of one-run baseball against the Cardinals. They put as many right-handed batters in that lineup against him as they possibly could. They were not rewarded. Just 3 hits in the game, all coming against Abbott over those first 7 innings, as he pretty much carved up the Cardinals in this one. A ton of fly ball outs, which is a little bit unique because it's not like he was striking out the world. The Cardinals only struck out against Abbott 3 times in 7 innings and 3 times for the entire game. But he was getting them on fly ball outs. 9 fly ball outs to 3 ground outs for Andrew Abbott, who cruised along in this game. I believe at one point he retired something like 15, 16 in a row, and the Cardinals really just had no answer to his pitch-to-contact style that worked at Busch Stadium. Andrew Abbott down the road would be an interesting candidate to pitch as a Cardinal. I don't know that you'd ever see an inter-division trade between the Cardinals and the Reds, but just thinking in terms of stylistically the things that have made him successful, I mean, you can hold a lot of fly balls in at Busch Stadium, and he certainly had the fly ball outs working today. 26-year-old who is finally getting healthy, or has been healthy, and so we've seen the best version of him this season. He does have 72 strikeouts in 75 innings, so maybe I'm underselling his ability to also miss bats, but he was great, and in my opinion, he does get the nod in the Jesse Plemons lookalike contest, because him and Miles Mikolas both have the sort of blondish, reddish hair going on. They both had the mustache. If you're familiar with the actor Jesse Plemons from Breaking Bad, he was in Black Mirror. He's been in a bunch of different stuff. I think he's married to Kirsten Dunst, actually. Anyway, I felt like that was the matchup that we should have always seen would have been these two linking up on the field, because they do kind of look like each other. That's not analysis that nobody cares from a baseball standpoint, but I always thought that would be fun, and we got to see it on Sunday, but unfortunately for the Cardinals, it ended in a 4-1 defeat. Miles Mikolas wasn't bad in this game. I mean, I think for the consideration of what the circumstances were, Miles actually had a pretty solid outing. He goes 5 innings, gives up just 2 earned runs, 3 total runs, as I believe it was the passed ball by Joel Pozo that immediately led to a sacrifice fly. The run scores from third instead of the runner having still been on second base, so that was an unearned run, I believe is the way that was categorized for Mikolas. But he pitched pretty well, had 6 strikeouts, which has kind of been a new revelation for him recently, using his pitches, his repertoire a little bit differently, and that's 2 outings in a row that we have seen him tick up on the K numbers. Had 7 strikeouts on June 15th against Milwaukee in a pretty good quality start, and then not quite a quality start in the game on Sunday, but had 6 strikeouts in 5 innings. So that's 13 strikeouts over his last 11 innings. Just for reference, the previous 2 starts that Mikolas made prior to his most recent 2, he also accumulated 11 innings across those 2 games, and he struck out 4 total batters. So to go from 4 strikeouts in 11 innings up to then 13 over his past 11 innings, I think is obviously a mark in the right direction. It's not the only thing, but it is something. And I would say that Mikolas definitely did give the Cardinals a chance to win the game on Sunday. The problem was the offense just did not get anything going against Abbott. In your lineup, you had Mason Wynn, Nolan Arenado, and Joel Pozo all come up with 1 base hit apiece, and Jose Barrero, who started the game in center field, reached via walk. That's it. And again, it's not that they were striking out a bunch. Jordan Walker, on a day where nobody really struck out twice. So certainly not seeing the best from him recently. And then Pozo had 1 strikeout as well. But you can live with that because he did have one of the few hits for the Cardinals. looking at some of the recent endeavors for Jordan Walker, it's been a little bit bleak of late. They've continued seemingly trying to go with having him in the lineup about every other day. And over his past couple of starts, 0 for 7 with 3 strikeouts in the Red Series. It was Sunday and Friday, the 2 games he started. He scored, of course, the winning run on Saturday, but that was as a pinch runner in the 11th inning. Also scored a run in the second game of the doubleheader or it might have been the first game. I'm just looking at the box scores. But he scored a run in a game that he did not start, similar circumstances. And he was 1 for 4 in the other game against the White Sox. So, like, tracing back about a week or so, he's 2 for his last 15, basically, with a good handful of strikeouts. So, seeing him maybe trend back in the other direction, it'll be an interesting opportunity to see what the Cardinals do with him in this Cubs series coming up, because that's what everybody's attention is fixing to turn to. And with right-hander Ben Brown on the mound for Chicago, listed as their probable starter on Monday, I would not be surprised to see Walker out of the lineup. Actually, I'd be surprised if he was in it on Monday, simply because the Cardinals are more likely to stack a bunch of lefties in the lineup. You didn't see Nootbaar in there on Sunday. It was kind of the inverse of that against Andrew Abbott. It didn't work out for the Cardinals. You had a righty and Barrero in there. You had a righty and Walker in there. Those 2 guys have not been performing. Certainly Walker, we know his story season long. Barrero just does not have much of a hit tool, but trying to stack one additional righty in that lineup was Oliver Marmol's intention in the game on Sunday. And like we said, it didn't pan out. So Nootbaar will be back in there for sure. I imagine you probably won't see Sajaci in there, who was 0 for 3 in the start against Abbott and the Reds on Sunday. That'll probably be Gorman that takes his spot. Donovan was actually the DH on Sunday. I imagine he'll be back in the field in some way or another. And even Alec Burleson, who had been red hot, was 0 for 4 in the game on Sunday. So this is one that, and I was pretty impressed, actually. You guys can let me know in the comments if your feelings about this Sunday loss match what the commenters had for the STL Sports Central postgame show that I did with Stephen Carey, where I think people generally kind of understood where things are. And, hey, you're able to get the series win against the Reds, where Saturday's game was very much in peril, and yet at the end of it, you still find a way to come away with a victory. That's very encouraging, and it's not the end of the world to drop this series to the Reds. It's frustrating for sure, but in a game where you did put balls in play, you just maybe got beat by a pitcher who, Andrew Abbott, has been no slouch this year. I mean, his ERA is 1.79 for the season. Like I said, he's a guy who, in his past, I remember for fantasy baseball purposes, I was in on him a couple of years ago, and he just took a while to get and stay healthy. And I think we're finally seeing that version of him, which is obviously to the benefit of the Cincinnati Reds. I think I had long since given up on Andrew Abbott in fantasy, unfortunately for me, because I am not going to be someone who benefits from his current run as good as he is pitching right now for Cincinnati. But yeah, he's finally putting it together. And he's one of the reasons, by the way, that over the past couple of years, I have considered the Reds to be maybe more dangerous going into a season than they ended up being in terms of the final standings, because a young pitching core with guys like Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, and Andrew Abbott as a part of that conversation, I kind of thought maybe the Reds would be a team to look out for year after year in the Central. And it's been those pitching prospects for the Reds that have largely been injured over the past just several seasons, it seems like. And this year, maybe they're getting a little bit more fortune on that front, because they are sitting a couple of games above 500 right now at 40-38 after beating the Cardinals on Sunday. The Cardinals 2 games ahead of 2 games ahead of Cincinnati at 42-36. Since I mentioned Milwaukee, I'll tell you what happened with the Brewers today. I'm actually looking it up now for the first time. They beat the Twins 9-8. The Twins are fraudulent and now 3 games below 500. I was just stunned for a while that the Twins were as good as they were in the standings. I just don't think they're a good team. Remember, the Cardinals swept them the first weekend of the season. They're now finally playing a little bit more like I expect, which is to be kind of a bottom feeder in the AL Central. That's just my opinion on that team. The Cubs lost, though. You can thank the Mariners for that. The Mariners put up a bunch of runs, a 14-6 win over Chicago. They scored runs in every inning but the third and the ninth. 2 in the first, 1 in the second, 1 in the fourth and fifth, 2 in the sixth, 2 in the seventh, 5 in the eighth, in a 14-6 defeat of the Baby Bears, which you would like to think that the Cubs would have used more pitching up today than they did. in a 14-6 defeat, but they basically just made Nate Pearson eat it out of the bullpen. Colin Ray, one of their kind of lesser starters, was the pitcher that started the game, and Chris Flexen ate it a little bit for them in the bullpen too. So the Cubs are pretty rested, I think, bullpen-wise, coming into this series that begins on Monday at Busch. How we feel about the Cardinals offensively, I think, is going to tell quite a bit about the tale for this upcoming series. Look, I think they'll be in an okay spot, but again, it's going to come down to matchups, and I think Ben Brown is a better matchup for the Cardinal offense in the way that they've got so many lefties that they can plug in. You're going to miss Ivan Herrera. I think that's a big key that we haven't talked a ton about yet because the Cardinals have continued winning, but his hamstring injury that's going to likely leave him out until the All-Star break, maybe beyond. You're talking about maybe a month plus for him. If you had not heard that, it seems like that's the way it's being described by the team in terms of the nature of the injury. Really unfortunate. It's that same leg where you had the bone bruise in the knee that left him out for the better part of the month of May. Really, it was April and May and into May. So that's unfortunate. And he's your right-handed slugger. To not have him, you're more reliant upon the guys that you do have from that side, like Nolan Arenado, like Wilson Contreras. And to various degrees, those guys will still get the job done. Thomas Saggese is up with the team now. That's the way that it ought to be, because there's a need, especially when you're facing some lefties, for right-handers to be in there. But we'll see. I think for people that had pined for Saggese, we're going to find out kind of what he's made of a little bit in some of the opportunity that he'll have to fill in there, because it'll just be basically you can fill him into a lot of what Herrera brought offensively, not in terms of production, but you can just say, hey, he was a righty batter. Now we're going to fit in this righty batter, and it'll actually give some guys like Donovan a chance to get off their feet. He was the DH today with Saggese playing at second base. So, like, there will be a benefit of that for the Cardinals defensively. You know, for those who want to see more Joel Pozo, I think you're going to get a chance to. But they are down to just the two catchers now, so we'll see how that impacts the way that Ollie Marmol makes out lineups and things of that nature, how he uses his bench. But it's going to be interesting to see. I think without Herrera, it's just going to be a case where everybody else has to pick up the slack. But I think we saw for the Cardinals there for a while in mid to late April and early May how the offense could suffer without Herrera's bat in there. I think the way the team was constructed, it was a team where everybody was saying, hey, they might win 75 games, they might win 80. Maybe things break right and they win 85. But they weren't a lineup that was necessarily constructed to have a bunch of big studs in the middle. Herrera kind of announced himself as one of those studs, and now that you are a Cardinals fan that has grown accustomed to seeing him in there, it's going to be a little bit different to suddenly see this Cardinals lineup as maybe not quite as productive day to day as it was, because he was a big part of being able to, with one swing, change a game. So without him, it'll be an interesting time to see how the Cardinals manage against the Cubs. And a little concerned, too, as I had mentioned on previous shows, you're talking about a bone bruise on the left knee and then a hamstring strain, a moderately severe one, apparently, on that same left leg. So I don't know how connected those injuries might be, but there might be something to that where you're compensating because of one previous injury in the way you run or the way you do things on the baseball field, and that would be unfortunate if it becomes sort of a recurring issue for Herrera. Something that I wanted to make sure to mention again. But in terms of what we know right now about the upcoming pitching matchups, I'm getting this from MLB.com. Ben Brown with a 5.57 ERA for the Cubbies takes on Liberatore tomorrow for the Cardinals. He's at a 4.08 ERA. Tuesday, the Cardinals did have listed Eric Fetty on MLB.com, and now that has been removed, as I can tell. Jameson Taillon still listed for the Cubs on Tuesday, and he's having a good year, 7-4 with a 3.84 earned run average. But I wanted to kind of check and see, there is that notion of Michael McGreevy conceivably fitting back in there for the Cardinals. And I was not covering the game today. I was on the pregame and the postgame for STL Sports Central, so I did not cover the game in person. But I'll be curious to see how the Cardinals maybe decide to either mix in Michael McGreevy again, because, again, you won't now need to worry about how many days it's been since he was last up, because when he came up over the White Sox doubleheader, that was a situation where he was called up as the 27th man. So interesting to potentially see the way the Cardinals want to mix him in there in this series, if they do, or if they don't. I would like to think that he will get an opportunity, as they still don't have another off day until July 3rd. And so leading into that, it would make a lot of sense to try to use the most of what you can to give some rest to your rotation. Could there be a roster move for Gordon Graceffo, who pitched 2 innings of relief on Sunday? That's kind of something else that I think is interesting to look at. We haven't really talked yet in this podcast about it, but Andre Granillo was optioned to Memphis on Sunday. And this was a move that did not surprise me at all, because we had talked about the need for fresh relief arms. And after that game on Saturday, I may have even mentioned it on B-Schaeff Daily early this morning. I think I probably did. That with him pitching in that game Saturday, an out in the 7th, the entire 8th inning, and then an out in the 9th, basically an up, down, up, back down, and back up again in 3 separate innings. He also pitched in 4 games in 5 days, including 2 games on Thursday. So he had been used quite a bit recently, and the Cardinals are trying to get to July the 3rd, that off day. They've also got a really important series coming up against the Cubs. And they also had a game in the Inferno on Sunday with Miles Mikolas starting. He's not been a guy that's gone super duper deep into games, mostly because you're trying to protect him from that third time through the opposing batting order, but also because, the effectiveness has at times waned for him around that spot of the game anyway. Now add feels like 105-degree temperatures to the mix. There was a realm in which Miles wasn't going to get very deep in this game. Now, he got you through 5, which is the same that Sonny got you on Saturday, so you feel fine about that. But they had to have some protection, and Graceffo ended up being that protection, where if Miles had gone 3 or 4 innings, Graceffo could have gone 3-4 innings potentially in relief, and then just been optioned back to Memphis the next day. Graceffo ends up being used for 2 innings. It was interesting to me that when the game was a little bit closer, innings 6 and 7, they go with Leahy, because I think that's kind of like, we'll try to keep the score the same. I would say Leahy is still ahead of Graceffo in the internal pecking order, even though Leahy did give up a run over 2 innings. Not a terrible outing for him, but just the reality of what his outing was. Gave up a hit, and that hit comes around to score. So it is what it is. But Leahy still has a 2.95 ERA on the season, struck out a couple of batters. Not overly concerned about him, even though I know some Cardinals fans maybe are. 21 pitches for Leahy. Graceffo throws 26 pitches. It's like, okay, now we're through 7 innings. We're down 4-1. It's probably not our day. We need Graceffo to be the guy that eats the rest of this game. He throws 26 pitches over those 2 innings. Is that enough to keep him out of action for tomorrow? Is that enough to keep him out of action beyond tomorrow for Tuesday? Like, how would they view that? It may be that he only threw 26 pitches and he could go back-to-back tomorrow and be fine, so they don't make a roster move and they think Graceffo is a solid arm that they want to continue to invest in, or they could swap him out. Now, the issue with that is Ryan Fernandez did pitch on Sunday in Memphis, so if they were holding back somebody like Fernandez, I would think they wouldn't have had him available, and the Redbirds won like 9-0. We'll talk about it down on the farm. But that's what's kind of interesting to me, that Fernandez did pitch. Tells me that he might not be on the list as somebody the Cardinals are looking to call up on Monday for Graceffo's spot. Maybe Graceffo only having to go 2 innings keeps him on the roster for the time being. Should be interesting to see what the Cardinals maybe do with that. But otherwise, you're looking at a rotation then where Fetty, I guess, would have been the Tuesday scheduled starter, because he went, I'm trying to backtrack a little bit here, into Thursday when you had that doubleheader. Obviously, McGreevy started one of those games of the doubleheader, so that gives you the ability to only burn one starter on that turn. Fetty was the other, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, regular rest for Fetty would be to pitch on Tuesday against the Cubs if the Cardinals would so choose to have him stay on regular rest. But the fact that he was then scratched out from that, kind of, at least according to MLB.com, and I haven't seen any beat writer tweets, that would tell me that maybe McGreevy is potentially in the plans, and Fetty would be one of the guys that they could give some extra rest to. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach that. But those are my thoughts. We'll talk all about the Cubs series as it happens, but before we get out of here on this episode, we want to make sure to take a moment and go down on the farm.
It's time to go down on the farm. Brought to you by Hastings Layers Premium Eggs.
You'll be happier than a jackass eating thistle.
Huh?
A very impressive outing for Tekoah Roby at AAA Memphis, as he was just recently promoted, as fans of the b-schaeff Daily podcast know, because we are always talking about things happening down on the farm. And in his first appearance with AAA, I believe he's now had a couple. I think he had one, and this was his second. Might have been his third. I'm going to go back and double check that. But it was, a little bit of an acclimation process for him at Memphis. So this was his third outing. The first one, 4 2/3, 6 earned runs, 10 hits. Still 5 strikeouts, so showing some good stuff there. June the 17th, that was when I was on vacation. That's probably why I missed it. 5 2/3, 6 earned runs, only 1 walk. Getting used to that new big league baseball that they use at AAA compared to AA. 4 strikeouts in that outing. So, 2 walks in that game, 1 walk in his first game, but giving up a lot of hits. Somehow, he locked it in pretty dang quick. On Sunday, against Norfolk, we suddenly see Tekoah Roby lock it in. 6 shutout innings, 3 hits allowed, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts. No runs across 6 innings for him on Sunday as the Redbirds win it 9-0, improving to 41-32. They got a pretty good record this year. Despite having all the pitching injuries that they had, now their rotation is kind of loaded, and they've got a bunch of decent bats in that lineup. Nathan Church has continued to be just tremendous. 3 for 5, 2 runs scored. He's hitting .426 with an 1149 OPS. Before people say it, why don't they call him up for Barrero? He is a left-handed batter, and Barrero is a right-handed batter. At a certain point, I think it's fair. You would say, does Barrero bring anything to the table? Offensively, not really. Versatility defensively is his best calling card. I think they trust him more at shortstop than they do Jose Fermin, who had a 2 for 3 day with a walk as well in AAA. So he's up to a 919 OPS, hitting .310. Fermin's put a nice year together. He was playing left field today. Church was playing center field. Fermin, I think you can maybe get away with, but would he give you a lot more than Barrero? I think Barrero's probably got more speed when he's used as a pinch runner. You can make the case, though, that Fermin deserves the opportunity with the numbers he's put up in AAA, and Barrero has not given you much at all. So I'd probably be okay to make that swap. But if they want to put if they want to put that position guy in center field at some point, it doesn't really make sense to do it with Fermin. I don't think they would trust him out there nearly as much, even though they don't really trust Barrero there either. So it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Matt Koperniak, by the way, is still OPSing .602 in Memphis. Another left-handed bat, though, too. I mean, they just cannot figure out a way to get some right-handed hitting outfielders. That's why they tried Valade as long as they did. But I digress. Roy Croft was good in relief, 2 scoreless innings. We will not see him on Monday because he has not been down in Memphis long enough to be recalled yet. Ryan Fernandez, scoreless inning, did walk a batter. He threw 13 pitches. If they were going to call him up, I don't think the big league staff would have allowed for him to pitch in Memphis today. So even though my guess on Sunday morning might have been that that's a roster move that we see, now I would predict we don't see it, at least with him, because he would obviously not be at the freshest he could have been had he been available there. So kind of curious about that. Also curious about this. Checking something here. Checking. Nope, never mind. I saw that in the Springfield game against Corpus Christi today that a pitcher named Swanson took the loss, and I'm thinking, why is Matt Swanson in AA? But it's not Swanson, it's Swanson with a W. The Springfield Cardinals actually did get the win, though. 3-1, a nice outing for their starter, Rincon, who has good numbers, too. Hansel Rincon has just recently been called up from the Palm Beach level, I want to say it was. Let me check that. Nope, he was at Peoria with a 4.2 ERA. Now in 3 appearances at AA, he has improved to a 2.9 ERA. So he's gone up a level, and he's been even better at the higher level than he was at the other one, which is pretty impressive. 25 strikeouts in 15 innings. The Cardinals' pitching development, I am telling you what, man, Rob Serfolio and his staff deserve a lot of credit. And Chaim Bloom obviously hired Surf in the beginning of all this. I think we're going to start to see the Cardinals churn out pitchers from their development pipeline once again. It's been a while since we've been able to say that. Rincon strikes out 11 in AA today. He's only been up at Springfield for a few weeks. I mean, that is incredibly impressive. So I'm knocking on a little bit of wood, but I think there's reason to be pretty excited and optimistic. Joshua Baez just continues to do Joshua Baez things, 2 for 4 with an RBI. He's OPSing 1,112 with a 323 average. He's another guy that had just recently been promoted, but we are seeing him do every bit of look the part right now at AA. JJ was 1 for 4. JJ Weatherholt OPSing 910 with a 321 batting mark. So a lot of fun going on throughout the Cardinals system lately. If you want to stay up to date on all of it, just make sure you're subscribed on our YouTube channel, or you can follow b-schaeff Daily on Spotify. But that is going to do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening, and we will talk to you next time after a Cardinals-Cubs Game 1 on Monday on b-schaeff Daily. Peace.